Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I offer an update on the case of Gregory Lynn, Russell Hill, and Carol Clay? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Gregory Stuart Lynn was born sometime around 1967 and lived in Melbourne, Australia. He went by the name Greg. After graduating from high school, Greg went to college for a year. He tried to become a fighter pilot, but was unsuccessful and became a commercial pilot instead. Greg married a woman named Lisa, and the couple went on to have 2 sons. The family lived in a house in Mount Macedon. The couple separated in 1992. On October 26 of that year, 34-year-old Lisa was found dead in the front yard of the couple's house. Her cause of death was drug and alcohol toxicity. Greg continued to live his life, and according to Lisa's friends, he did not even attend the funeral. In 2007, Greg was hired by the regional airline Jetstar, which is known for their low fares. Greg married a woman named Melanie, and the couple lived in Caroline Springs, which is a suburb of Melbourne. This brings me to the other 2 key players in this story. In 2020, a 74-year-old man named Russell Hill lived about an hour east of Greg's home. Russell was a retired logging contractor and loved spending time outdoors. He had married a woman named Robin in 1969, but was having an affair with a 73-year-old woman named Carol Clay. Carol was Russell's first love. They reunited in 2005 and started cheating. Robin caught them in 2006 and gave Russell an ultimatum: terminate the affair or terminate the marriage. Russell promised to stop seeing Carol, but he was lying. In order to create the opportunity to have sex without getting caught, Russell and Carol would often go camping together in remote areas of the wilderness. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On March 16, 2020, Greg Lynn went for a trip in a mountain range in southeastern Victoria called the Victorian Alps. This area is also referred to as the High Country. Greg was driving his Nissan Patrol SUV and brought a rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun. On March 19, Russell Hill picked up Carol Clay so they could begin a camping and sex adventure in the High Country. Russell was driving his new 70 Series Toyota Land Cruiser. It doesn't appear as though Russell was armed. The closest thing he had to a projectile weapon was a recently filled prescription for Viagra. On March 20, Russell and Carol arrived in an area called Bucks Camp, about 200 miles northeast of Melbourne. Sometime that evening, an altercation occurred between the couple and Greg Lynn, who was camping just a few feet away. Russell and Carol were both killed. Greg put their bodies in a small trailer that he was towing behind his Nissan and set fire to the campsite. Later, he disposed of their bodies in a rural area about 15 miles away. After returning home, Greg went on with his life. On March 27, campers stumbled on the campsite and notified the authorities. Considering that Russell and Carol were having an affair, the police wondered if they simply ran off together, but realized that Russell would not have deliberately started a fire inside his own tent. The police searched the area extensively, but did not find the couple. Surveillance video in this area was reviewed. One camera had captured a Nissan Patrol pulling a small trailer on March 21 at 9:48 a.m. The vehicle was on Great Alpine Road. 10 seconds before the image was captured, Russell Hill's cell phone pinged in that same area, as if it was in the vehicle. The police wondered what Russell's cell phone would be doing there. Investigators were able to identify the vehicle as belonging to Greg Lynn. About 4 months after Russell and Carol disappeared, the police stopped by Greg's house in Caroline Springs. They noticed that the Nissan Patrol was beige in color. However, in a photograph taken just over a year earlier, the Nissan Patrol was blue. Greg had repainted his vehicle on June 4 using a roller and house paint. He told the police the painting project was a COVID-19 activity. Nothing like causing massive and unnecessary depreciation to your expensive SUV to enhance the COVID lockdown experience. There was no sign of Greg's small trailer. The police never found it. They believed that he disposed of it. By December 2020, Greg was the prime suspect in the murders of Russell and Carol. The police told the media that they were desperately searching for the owner of the Nissan Patrol, but of course they already knew it belonged to Greg. They were trying to pressure Greg into making some type of mistake, which he did in November 2021. Greg removed an awning from the side of the SUV and disposed of it. Surveillance was maintained on Greg for quite a while. The police secretly recorded his phone calls and installed listening devices in his house and in his vehicle. 5,287 secret recordings were made, some of which featured Greg talking and singing to himself. He made a number of statements, which may have been references to Russell and Carol. For example, quote, "Who decides what's right and what's wrong? That's the thing. Judgment. Judge does. The law does. The community does." Unquote. And, quote, "I saw some people fishing. What's that? A snake bite? Would be a good way to go. Just blanking never know when it's coming. Blank, blank. Australia's gift." Unquote. On one occasion, Greg and his wife Melanie could be heard watching the TV special about the murders, which featured the police talking about their search for the Nissan Patrol. Melanie laughed hysterically and said, "It looks like your car. It really does." Greg replied, "It's not funny. Sweet pea." The police would have recorded Greg even longer, but his monologue grew disturbingly dark, and they were worried that he was going to bring harm to himself. On November 22, 2021, Greg was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. Even though he was advised by an attorney not to say anything, Greg supplied the police with his account of what happened. Here's what he said. On March 20, 2020, Greg was at Buck's camp. Russell and Carol were camped next to him. When Greg went hunting, he noticed Russell's drone flying overhead. When Greg returned to the campsite, Russell told him that he had been hunting too close to the camp and was going to report him to the police. So Russell was threatening Greg. In order to aggravate Russell, Greg went to the Nissan Patrol and played loud music. This interfered with Russell's efforts to have sex with Carol. Again, Russell had that recent prescription for Viagra that was burning a hole through his pocket. Sometime between 9 and 10 p.m., Greg heard Russell near the Nissan Patrol. Russell had stolen Greg's shotgun and a magazine and was walking away. Greg approached him to get the weapon back, but Russell fired at least 2 shots in the air and yelled, "Blank off." Worried about getting shot, Greg took cover behind Russell's Land Cruiser and then quickly lunged at him. The 2 men wrestled to gain control over the shotgun. During this process, Russell accidentally pulled the trigger. The shotgun blast blew the mirror off the Land Cruiser before striking Carol in the head. She was killed instantly. Russell let go of the shotgun, and Greg took the weapon back to the Nissan Patrol. He fired the last shotgun shell in the air as he did this. At this point, Russell retrieved a black-handled kitchen knife and charged at Greg, yelling, "She's dead." The 2 men tumbled to the ground, and Russell fell on the knife. When Greg looked at him, the knife was sticking out of Russell's chest. Russell did not survive this encounter with the knife. Fearful that nobody would believe his story of self-defense, Greg burned the campsite and disposed of the bodies. He returned to the disposal area twice. The second time, he set the bodies on fire. On November 29, 2021, the remains of Russell Hill and Carol Clay were found right where Greg indicated. Greg went to trial for the murders in May 2024. On June 26, the jury found Greg not guilty of murdering Russell Hill, but guilty of murdering Carol Clay. Greg is scheduled to be sentenced on July 19, 2024. The maximum possible sentence he could receive is life in prison. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Greg Lynn was described as quick to anger, moody, pedantic, cheap, violent, opinionated, a bully, and not a pleasant person. He was also described as intelligent, charismatic, mild-mannered, charming, and well-groomed. His first wife, Lisa, told people that he assaulted, threatened, and harassed her. One of Lisa's relatives said that Greg's behavior was bizarre, and he had a warped mind. He would lose his temper, yell, throw things, and push Lisa around. Allegedly, Greg verbally attacked a man at a hotel who spoke to Lisa, killed a neighbor's pet, and used an axe to decapitate a pig that Lisa owned after the animal destroyed his plants. Item number 2, Greg's story about how Russell and Carol died is ludicrous. He would have people believe that during the struggle to get control over the shotgun, the weapon magically discharged. Greg didn't pull the trigger, so it must have been Russell. Out of all the places the shotgun could have been pointed, it just happened to be aimed right at Carol's head. Furthermore, Russell produces a knife, attacks Greg, and just happens to fall on the knife in a way that fatally penetrates his chest. I find it interesting that Greg's story included 4 shotgun blasts. The 2 warning shots fired by Russell, the fatal shot fired by Russell, and the shot fired by Greg afterward. I think Greg fired the shotgun 4 times himself to kill Russell and Carol, and was trying to make sure that his story matched up with any people in the area who may have heard the shotgun blasts. There is no question that Greg should be given points for creativity. I think he was one step away from involving aliens, secret agents, or kangaroos in his explanation for the fatalities. A serial killer kangaroo would actually have been a lot more believable than Greg's magic gun and magic knife story. The kangaroo slogan could have been, "You will rue the day." It's amazing that the jury had any doubt at all in this case. The verdict of not guilty for Russell's murder makes no sense. It would appear as though the jury did not sympathize with Russell. I think the problem was that his 15-year affair made him thoroughly unlikable, and he had a history of being antagonistic. Item number 3, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. As a pilot, Greg Lynn was probably detail-oriented. He appreciated the value of following a procedure, like a checklist. He may have had characteristics of subclinical psychopathy, so levels of psychopathic traits that do not disrupt functioning. These traits are overrepresented in certain careers. For example, police officers, paramedics, soldiers, skydivers, surgeons, and pilots are more likely to have subclinical psychopathy than the general population. A person with these traits may be a little cold, callous, and fearless, but not to such a degree that they would qualify as having something like antisocial personality disorder. These traits are actually necessary. Without them, most high-stress jobs would never be filled. Subclinical psychopathic traits are positively correlated with 2 extroversion facets, assertiveness and sensation-seeking. Russell Hill also had personality traits that made a confrontation more likely. He was antagonistic, sensation-seeking, manipulative, dominant, and had a sense of entitlement. On March 20, 2020, Greg and Russell became involved in some type of dispute. Greg could have interfered with Russell's ability to have sex with Carol. Russell may have pitched a tent that evening, but he was interested in pitching one more. He wanted to take his outdoor experience to new heights, using his own version of a pop-up camper. Greg's obnoxious and loud music represented stiff competition, which prevented Russell from rising to the occasion. Whatever the source of the altercation, Greg used his shotgun to murder Russell. Carol witnessed the murder, so Greg killed her as well. He then made an extensive effort to conceal his involvement. This is where the subclinical psychopathy really paid off. He was able to calmly handle the bodies and dispose of them. In a curious twist, Greg was caught because he forgot to check Russell's body for a cell phone. That phone pinging in the area of Greg's Nissan Patrol is what led Greg to being caught. Greg was familiar with following a checklist, but clearly did not have one for murder. Those are my thoughts on the case of Gregory Lynn, Russell Hill, and Carol Clay. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They consistently generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.